Welcome to the Green Desk Podcast. I'm your host, Vic Kinsella. On today's episode, Miss Fola Veritas from Deep Mind Squared, where she bridges mental health and spirituality. Fola is a psychiatric nurse as well as a shamanic practitioner. Welcome, Fola.
But hello, Vic. Thanks for having me.
I just want to do a little brief, we met. Crystal and I were trying to figure this out if it was at the onset of COVID or just after COVID started, but I had reached out to Crystal because she had advertised I guess you could call it a spiritual event on Tuesdays where we get together and we talk about spirituality, and then we lead into some meditation. I met Crystal first, and then the next time I came on, you were, and it was amazing to actually sit and can actually have conversation, allow the mind to calm down. So that's roughly, I guess you could say.
Yeah. I think it was around that time because we had created a podcast initially, Connecting to Spirit, it was called. And then it kind of led to, well, we want to reach out to people more, not just with hearing our voices necessarily. So we started those groups, like meditation groups. And I think that's where I met you and a few other people from across North America even. It was super nice to be able to connect with people during a time where there was so much disconnection happening.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So Fola, subject that popped up, and as I had mentioned, it was you were the first person I thought about, you and actually Crystal. And somebody was trying to explain to me about feminine energy and masculine energy, so male and female energies, and how they can balance each other out, cancel each other out. And I just wanted to know more about it. Tell me in the audience about it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. I think there's like so many different schools of thought around the feminine and masculine, and it's just coming up more, is this because of this branching from even like the feminist movement? I think though that the whole feminist movement tends to really downplay the masculine, or like shoot it down, or even like talk that it shouldn't be there. But I think if we go into a lot of like older Eastern traditions, you're the martial artist, like I'm sure they talk about that like balance, like, there's something powerful about action, which would be identified as like the masculine energy, but there's also something about that passive receptive energy and like just the patience and waiting almost for your opponent to do the move and then to take the energy and like flow with it. I'm not a martial artist, so this is just how I perceive it from like movies. That would be like the more feminist sort of energy, right? Or that feminine energy. So, thinking of like the yin yang symbol, where one side is like the yin, one is the yang, one's more passive, one's more active, the one's the light, one's the dark. It's like those two polarities in a sense are required in order to make the whole. And then I love how they have like the, inside both of them, they also have the aspect of the other, like, so that it shows that like kind of difference between. I think that's when the important part, when we talk in like within like a spiritual sort of aspect of balancing our feminine and our masculine energies, because if we are too much, if we're too much in the feminine, then we can be just like, passive. We don't do anything. We don't take any action ever. Sometimes we let people like walk all over us, right? We feel very powerless. And if we're too much in that masculine, then it's like so aggressive and it's just constant go, 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 this is where I think this feminist sort of movement has been somewhat helpful over the last like decades, is the fact that it's really kind of highlighting the importance of how us not being so out of balance, where we have had, there's that phrase like toxic masculinity. I think we also have like a toxic femininity, but the
Yes.
toxic masculinity we've seen over these decades, well, centuries technically, with like the patriarchal system, is that the overuse of power. And I guess I should have also probably started before I got into all that, is the fact that when I say feminine and masculine, it doesn't mean that if you're a woman, you're only feminine, and if you're a man, you're only masculine. It's that
Correct.
each of us, you, Vic, me, we all have the need to balance both internally our masculine and our feminine aspects.
Yes. Yes.
And that when I think, at least in my journey, is like when we can do that, we start to experience just like more joy, more peace. There's a more of a flow, we talk about like these flow states. It's like we're able to balance between, and then I could go into like a segue, well, not a segue, but another conversation on how I've really learned this method or this process with the shamanic work that I do, because we also talk about it there in terms of the stalker and the dreamer, which would be like the masculine as a stalker, not like the creepy stalker that's like trying to watch you in your sleep. I mean, that would be the toxic masculinity piece maybe. And then the dreamer is that receptive feminine, just being intuitively in the flow, right? And allowing like things to play out in the universe in our benefit. So yeah, there's like, there's so many ways we could go with this topic. But I think it's important.
I did find, like, when I was younger, before I had a daughter, like my oldest son, he came first, and just being, that powerhouse in the martial arts world, and being a bit of a, I guess you could say, a meathead. And then when my daughter was born, it changed a lot of things. And there was two pinnacle moments that actually changed and made me more, I guess you could say, aware of the feminine side. And that was obviously my daughter. When she started growing up, it doesn't matter how much of an alpha dog you are. When your daughter says you're going to dress like a princess today, you do it, right? You grasp that.
You do that, yeah.
But there was a second stage where I actually worked in a factory, and I was the plant supervisor, and I'd say 85 to 90% of my work population were women. And it was like, you couldn't be forceful. You couldn't go out and say, look, I need this clean now, right? Because then all of a sudden, my employee would start breaking down into tears, and then I'd be like Tom Hanks, in that movie. Like, there's no crying in baseball.
Oh.
And with a different side, approach differently, and then we started getting such a great working dynamic with that team. It was amazing. It was one of the hardest working groups I had ever been with. But there's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance. And as people start talking about it more and more, it's really clicking, right?
Yeah, I think as people are realizing that, because we all have those experiences in our life. I agree with you. I think childbirth or having children is a huge part. And that's because kids are so in tune with that balance overall. Like, they know how to play. I mean, maybe they're more in the feminine, but they'll also say things, and they'll be active, and they'll, like, speak their truth, even if it's at the detriment of someone else's, like, well-being. But they really are in that. And so it's like, it awakens us to realize, like, oh, what about this? How can I have more fun and play, and still get things done and talk with people, in a way that's like caring. So that's neat to hear that you had that experience on a couple of occasions. And I'm sure more, right? Those two just being the ones that stand out at this point.
Yes.
Yeah. And the thing I'm really learning now for myself, because it's almost as though within spiritual communities, there is in any spiritual or religious, or I guess group mentality, there is a need for us to be very like by the book And like this, you know, you think of the phrase like a sacred feminine, like there's the terms like the goddess and people coming into their like queenness and all that stuff.
Yes.
And it just seems to have this very like cookie cutter approach of, oh, look, like you're such a good person and you're that powerful being and dad, you know, it's all very positive. And to me, it's almost like a spiritual bypassing where we fail to look at the shadow aspect of that like archetype of the queen or the king, right? Depending on kind of where we're working. And that's somewhere that I've been like diving into more, is like that dark feminine piece where, and I think that's where a lot of the healing needs to come, is we've been told, like, especially for women, you know, told not to be a certain way. And for some men, right? When men want to become emotional because they're trying to express something, right? Because when it's not only women that cry, it's like they've been told no, not to, and like all this generational pattern that has like, you know, it's now kind of being broken. It's like us looking into those kind of heavier emotions and those, you know, uncomfortable feelings and like thoughts and sensations. And I think that's also a really important part of this whole process within the feminine and masculine energy like discussion. Yeah.
Excellent. So what else do you do? I noticed on your Instagram you do cards, and you pull cards. Explain that. I've watched some of them and I'm like, this is cool, but I totally don't understand it.
Yeah, neither do I. That's good. No. Oh, cards. Yeah, so like I do intuitive card readings. So that's kind of what you probably see. I'll just go online and do live videos when I feel called. I'm like, oh, okay, I kind of feel like I want to do it. I find it's energizing and fun. And so using different cards that I have, like whether they're oracle cards, there's like the tarot cards as well. Definitely wouldn't say I'm an expert at tarot reading, because like the tarot, so before I guess to those people who might be listening and they're like, this is like evil, not good. Like these cards are all representations of like our psyche. So you know, if you've heard of the phrase like the archetypes.
Yes.
Yeah, so you know, we've got like the fool, we've got the caregiver, we've got all these different like archetypes. These cards represent those archetypes. So I think a lot of times people think, oh, if you go to a card reader, they're going to tell you your future and like what's going to happen. I mean, there are some people who are really good at that work, but I'm like, I don't like that, because it's almost as if someone's telling you this is what your destiny is and that's it. And it kind of takes the power away from the individual, right? It's like now they're stuck in this thought that, oh, you know, this thing's going to happen and that's the only possibility. Whereas like quantum physics shows us every possible like thing exists, right? Everything is possible. So the important part with the cards, and what I find with people, it's like the card that shows up usually is a representation of something that's going on in the person's like consciousness or their subconscious, right? They might not be fully aware of it and it's just wanting to be seen. So those cards are representing like kind of like a physical representation of what's happening on an internal sort of realm. So and that can be like a confirmation usually for people. I find people who are open and curious enough to like access the cards or come for a reading, it's because they are curious and they're open to seeing it. So they're going to see it in a certain way. And then there's people who aren't open to that, and that's totally cool. It's like maybe it's just not the time for them to learn it, or they're not at that place yet where they want to maybe make the changes. Because it's like the cards will tell you things that need to happen in your life. Otherwise, it's going to continue down the path of whatever, you know, unfortunate thing that might be playing out, you know, like the old patterns or the ways we might be perceiving our life and the choices that we continue to make that just lead us to more heartbreak or, you know, uncomfortable sort of energies or emotions playing out. So that's why I like the cards, because like it's a nice confirmation. I then can just give a message of what comes up when it's coming up. I love hearing people's feedback after, because it seems like it's usually spot on. So that's always a nice confirmation for me, because there's most of the times I'm on there, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just like, blah, blah. And then people will message me after, like, oh my gosh, like, you have no idea. And they share this whole story. And I'm like, whoa, like, and that also is like the confirmation for me of like, there's something greater than what I can comprehend with my human mind that is playing out and connecting us all, right? I think that we can
Correct.
so
Correct.
oftentimes feel so separated, separated from our gifts and from ourselves, but also from like other people in like our life, right? They might not really get us. So that to me is a huge confirmation. And that also is how I kind of step more into my feminine, is that intuitive part. Because I wasn't really into that necessarily. Like I like spiritual things, but I grew up being told a lot of that stuff's not good.
Yeah.
So it's just me like trusting it more. And
I think a lot of society is brought up with the fact that spiritualism is just, it's a fluke, or it's not true. But my one wow moment was, I went down to Detroit for a martial arts seminar, and my karate instructor said to me, let's go and meet my friends. And the one elderly lady does Turkish coffee readings. And I'm like, what's that? Like, is she gonna read my coffee while I'm drinking it? And so anyways, we went there, and she made a batch of Turkish coffee and poured it all out for us. And when we were done drinking it, we had to flip it upside down quickly and put it down and let it dry.
Yeah.
And then she would pick it up and read how the coffee grinds and the residue drained out. And I remember she picked up mine, and then she started talking to her friend, and they're both staring at me, and I'm like, okay, what's going on?
Happening?
And they said that they said many good things would happen in my life down the road, but soon some pieces of paper will affect my life negatively and cause me a lot of pain and anguish. And I'm just like, okay, so I'm thinking about everything. Am I going to get a really big speeding fine? And you're going through all this. Well, probably about 6 months later, that's when my divorce happened.
Oh yeah.
So it was like, that's when it really became a wow moment, right? That the pieces of paper will negatively affect me and really, really hurt me. And that's when it's just like, wow. Like some of this stuff there, people can be really connected to nature, to spiritualism, and they can go to a different heightened sense of awareness than the average Joe that just goes to work and goes home, eats his dinner, goes to sleep, right? And that was really freaky for me.
Yeah. Oh,
and the
for
coffee
sure.
was good. The coffee was good.
You like the Turkish coffee? That's the Arabic coffee. That's really nice.
I love
Super
coffee.
strong. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like when you, I guess, again, many people, they don't want to hear those things. They aren't interested in like taking any movement because it's comfortable to be in the life that we live right now, usually, right? There might be little things or some big things that we're like, we just keep dealing or coping with. We're like, whatever, it's not that bad, because making the changes and facing the reality of what is can be much more challenging. And yeah, so I can hear that. That's why I'm like, I've been told there's a few like readers that I'm like, oh, I'd kind of like to go, but I'm like, no, I'm also good, because I'm like, I'm gonna just keep like working on my stuff the way I want to. I don't want to. And again, like I mentioned, it's like sometimes we get told things. I know I've been to somewhere I'm told something, and then I'm like ruminating, what does that mean? And like, oh my gosh, is this thing? And there was a period in my life with my ex where like we have like a very intense relationship, like whatever, weird connections. And we would like have so many like dissolutions of it, like a dissolving of that relationship. And then we'd come back together. And I would have these experiences where I'm like, I was so confused of like, what did I want? Did I want to be with him? Did I want to be by myself? Like, are we meant to be together? Is like he the one? Like, what is this? And I would go on YouTube and like videos would pop up in my feed from different card readers or intuitive people. Some would be saying like, he's the one, like literally the title would be like, this is the one, like you need to go. And they would be speaking to me. And then I like the next day I'd find another one that said the complete opposite of what the other one had said, right? And so what I started to realize is like, I basically am just creating both of these realities because I am confused about like what I actually want, what is actually in my highest good. And so it's like, I think we just have to be really mindful of that. And I'm not one to pull cards. Like I don't go every day pulling cards for myself. Like I'll go through periods where I'm like, I'll pull cards, I'll post them online. I like to share, but for me, it's more just the message that's like coming through because I trust that maybe one person might need to hear that. Right. But I don't go and set out the cards and look at the astrology and be like, okay, what's happening? Because I'm now having to base my whole life decision based like on what I'm being shown here. Cause like, that's not life. That's not choice. No. That's just allowing something external to dictate. Right. And I think that again, goes back to all that feminine talk. It's like trusting your inner desires and your inner need for passion and joy, like, and this is what we all need, men, women, or whatever you might identify as. It's like what lights you up inside and trusting and listening to that process. And within shamanism, we talk about like the womb, which I think this is the same with martial arts. You know, you have your center of gravity, right? Is that the Dantian? Is that the correct?
Am I thinking? Yes.
Okay. Yes. It's like, so it's like that place kind of just below our belly button, you know, for women, that's the womb space. Men also, it's like that center of gravity. If we can be in that place, that's where we have more of our power. That's where we're really connected to our intuition. And we like, if someone were to come up to you and you were to breathe in that place, if they tried to push you, you would just be like a tree, like swaying, right? But if as soon as you go up into your head or you're like somewhere else in thought or whatever, your energy is like thrown off. If someone came to try to push you, you'd be like falling over, right? And so It's so important that we like come back to that place and connect there, because that's where a lot of our answers and our guidance can come from. It's just life becomes easier, you know?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, in martial arts, we do teach about, we call it rooting yourself to the ground, becoming one with the ground. That way you're immovable. Channeling the chi in the lower belly. You know, that's your energy center, and then bringing it up through your body to exert force and protect yourself.
Yeah, exactly. I love hearing the parallels between all these different ways of life, right? Shamanism, or like there's so many different things. The martial arts, like everything goes back to that same place, right? And I think our ancestors really knew that. And there's like some interesting theories like around how our society now, we are so much higher in like the intellect, in the heart, even like I think we're making our way down again to that like center of gravity, to that place of like power, because you know there's more conversation now about like heart math and like the heart space and opening, you know, heart coherence and connecting. It's like that's all good, but I think it's like we need to go even lower. And this is why we have so much shame and guilt around sexuality as well. And that's a huge thing that feminine or women especially have dealt with, right? Is like, don't be in that place. Don't be in the pleasure, because that's all like what that's connected to. But it's like the more we can connect back down and root, which is what our ancestors did. They were always in the earth. They were always grounded and connected, right? And that's like kind of what those like lower parts of our body represent in terms of that like energy center or chakra system. It's like the more we can be in that, the more supported we feel, the more secure we feel. And then, the more connected we are to that intuition and like deeper knowing and wellness, I think, in our like mind, body, and soul, right?
Yes. Yes.
Oof, I'm just blabbing stuff out.
Yeah. I had a karate student. He said, like, how can I deeply meditate? How can I practice no mind? And it was so funny because I looked at him. I said, go out in the woods and hug a tree. And he's like, what? And I said, no, seriously, go connect with nature. see what our forefathers seen, see what, 1,000 years ago it was like. People 1,000 years ago respected the forests, the woods, the creatures more than we do today.
Mm-hmm.
And you read about it every day. Yes, I've been volunteering in tree planting and aftercare of trees, and there's movements to plant trees and do better for the environment. But then, in this country, not Canada, but this country over here, we're just chopping down thousands of hectares of trees and not replacing them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, to me, I think to be sustaining with nature, to be one with nature, if you chop down a tree, replace a tree, or replace two trees. That's how we're going to sustain the planet. That's how we're going to connect with nature. That's how you're going to be one with nature and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, that's the lesson I was trying to teach my student.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of worrying about no mind, think about nature around you and how you can protect it, and enact martial arts in nature, and ultimately be one.
Well,
Right?
and this just like lights up so much stuff. Like I love that because because I perceive you too as like a healthy version of the masculine. So I appreciate you in my life, Vic. Thank you. Since the first day I met you. Just how like, in like our groups, how you would be able to support other men. Like I know there were times where other men that came might share something on like an emotional level. And Crystal and I, like I know I felt this way at least. I think Crystal would agree too. It's like we kind of felt like we could sit back and you would present yourself and offer that like ability to like provide support from like an emotional level, but also from that masculine, like a healthy masculinity. And so you
Yeah.
basically have been teaching men and others like how to protect the feminine, right? And that's kind of what you're doing
Yes.
with that, like rebuilding the earth, like our mother earth. That's why it's called our mother earth. Like she is the one that's here and providing us life, just like a mother nurtures a baby, right? Same. And it's like, so we also have to be able to protect. And I think as men, especially because so many men are disconnected from their healthy femininity and their healthy masculinity. They just don't know, and they've kind of given up. And I think that's why we see so many more men they feel like really dependent on the government or on their spouse or whatever the case might be.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of feel unsafe to express and show like their strength. But that can be like such a great way to reconnect to it, and them to learn like, oh, I can be in my power in a healthy way. And that means standing up for what I believe in and what is valued as like good for all of like the earth and all of humanity. And that is like such a beautiful thing. So
Yes.
oh,
Yeah, it's getting, as you get older, you start, in martial arts, when you're a young warrior, you think about smashing things.
mm.
And then when you get a little bit older, it's like, okay, well, I don't really want to smash things. I just want to protect myself. And then when you get even older, you start realizing, okay, well, I want to protect myself if I have to, but how do I just avoid the whole conflict anyways? It's a lot easier. I don't have to exercise as much.
You just sit and yeah.
I know, but just in daily life, you grow up, you like to go out in the woods, you like to play, you like to imagine things. And then, as you mature, you actually start seeing the damage that we as human beings are doing to this earth. You drive behind a car and somebody tosses out their McDonald's bag on the road. It's like, what are you doing?
I don't understand. I just saw that yesterday. I was driving, some guy had all these papers and he was walking and he just threw them on the ground.
I know.
And I was like,
I know.
And it's funny you mention that, because I'm like, initially I was kind of like, what is wrong with you? And then I went to like, what is actually going on for him? Like, why is it that he feels the need to just litter all that on the earth that's like he's walking on, right?
Yeah.
And it like threw me into kind of like his life of like, I wonder what types of traumas and experiences that he has had to like be so
Correct.
disconnected, right? And like I kind of had like it went from like kind of an anger to then this compassion. Like
Yes.
we've all kind
Yes.
of been there, but yeah, we're just so disconnected. So I like your the idea. I tell people all the time, just go into nature, just spend time, even if it means sitting in your vehicle and like don't leave the car running. Like, if it's cold out, like it gets minus 30, 40 here, like, turn your car on a bit and then turn it off or whatever. But like you can dress up warm, there's ways we can
Yeah.
get around it and just spend time like observing nature and being present. And if you can't get outside, look out your window, look at art or pictures. They say that that can be equally as powerful,
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, as you start to mature in life, you start to realize the finer things. Like when you're younger, you look at a sunset and oh, that's cool. And then you get married, you have kids, and oh, the sunset is romantic, you know. But then when you get older, you actually sit there and stare at it and
Mm-hmm.
just think about life. Like this is a sunset. This is one more day down, right? One more day. Do I have any regrets from today?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do tomorrow to enhance my life? And it really starts to cannonball, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
snowball effect.
Mm-hmm.
But like in winter, I swear I should never have been born a Canadian because I cannot stand the winter. But one thing I do like is when I take my dog out in the wintertime, just because there's so much snow, it insulates the sound. It just seems like everything's so quiet in the wintertime, right? And then in the summer, when
Oh
you're
yeah, I
walking through the
honestly,
woods, you're hearing the everything
yeah.
rustling and the wind blowing. And I never noticed that before. Up until
Mm-hmm.
the past few years, especially with COVID, going for walks in the woods in the wintertime, it's like, damn, it's so quiet out here. Like you really start to appreciate what's
Mm-hmm.
happening around you, and that's it. It changes you. It
Yeah,
changes you
yeah, and I
if
I
you
would,
embrace it.
yeah,
If
if
you
you,
embrace it, it
yeah.
changes you.
At least like on an insightful level or being aware of it. But yeah, I hear you say, but what I've learned is that I actually prefer going in nature in winter time because I can just dress up and bundle up. Maybe I can't stay out too long if it's super windy and cold, but I can go and sit anywhere because it's just snow. Whereas
Yeah,
now with like summertime, it's like there's bugs and there's rain and mud
yeah,
and dirt, like, and I don't really have proper, I'm not going to wear a bunch of layers to protect myself if it's like plus 30 out. So that's, yeah. And it's less busy. There's less people out there. So it's kind of like nicer. And then I wanted to throw in, I think that too is that kind of connection to, if we look at the seasons on a archetypal or theme level, it's like, we have summer, everything's really abundant and it's like growing and it's out there, and then we start going into fall where everything is dying, and then it's like
yes,
winter, this long period, at least here in Edmonton it's like super long, whatever, like 8 months or something, it seems. It's like a long period of just death, of nothing, of being in like a void or
yes,
like a dark space. And that too, it's kind of like when a woman is giving birth, like nothing's really, it's like the baby's inside there for so long, nothing is like, things are happening, but it's just like this intensity of like not really fully knowing. And it's like if we can go within, hibernate, which is what the animals do during that time, and
yes,
just like be with that silence and kind of the uncomfortable place again, because it's not always comfortable to have quiet. We're always so distracted with our phones or like all the things we have to do. But if
yes,
we can slow down and allow, then that's when all the insights and ideas for like the next period or the next theme, where then spring comes, and it's like we're starting to like have like a birth of something new, and then yeah, it comes, it births summer, harvest in the fall, right? And it's like then you just
yeah,
do the whole thing again. And it's
yes,
like, yeah, it's amazing to see it in this way. If we can honor that cycle within ourselves and in our world. And that's what femininity, I think, really is the cycles of life, right? Just like women are always going through cycles.
yes. Excellent. Do you
Mhm.
find women are more compassionate than men?
Um, I don't, I wouldn't necessarily say compassionate. I think
Yeah.
women just have a tendency to see things differently because they are in a different like emotional place, you know,
Yeah.
like, and what for whatever reason. I don't think it's necessarily that we're even more connected there, but maybe it just, yeah, I'd have to ponder that one because because there's women that aren't compassionate at all. But it's like maybe, but is that because there's so much in like their toxic masculinity? You know, I think of
Yeah.
people I've seen working in like healthcare, and there's many women. Like I'm a nurse, so there's many nurses who, you know, like women nurses who are not compassionate, and they're just very like direct and get the thing done, and they detach themselves from the emotion. And I think that more has to
Yeah.
do with their personal the traumas they've gone through or the things that they've used to kind of protect their heart. And yeah, so that's kind of my answer to that one. Why? What
Yeah.
do you think?
I've, I don't know. I sometimes I see, you know, I've spent some time with Miranda Chamosa. She's a really good life coach down in Mexico City. And she really opened my eyes the one day talking about compassion and how I see it and my perspective of it. And actually, you know, to me, I thought being compassionate was, you know, if I seen somebody living on the streets, it's like, oh, poor guy, you know, but that's more empathetic.
Mhm.
But compassion is actually what happened, you know, how'd you get to this point? And hearing the story. And, you know, Miranda had asked me to do some homework because my father's a very negative person. Just everything is negative. You know, if the sun's beautiful out, it's negative. So literally, I sat down with him and I just asked him some questions about, you know, stuff, how he was brought up, and I started putting two and two together about how this can affect you down the road.
Mhm.
Therefore, I was starting to get more compassionate about you know, my father's feelings and how his negativity has come about. So then I started watching more and more people. I, as a martial artist, I like to people watch. I could literally go sit in a mall and just entertain myself for hours watching people, right?
Yeah.
My favorite are the people that talk to themselves,
Who doesn't do that?
but but I just started watching, you know, how certain people react to certain situations. And sometimes I would see, you know, some men reacting very compassionately. But then I found it just seemed more quicker for a woman to exercise compassion than it would a man. So I started thinking, you know, is this more a feminine thing to enact compassion faster than it is a male? Is it because of the male ego and the masculinity that we don't exercise as much compassion? Or, and that's, you know, just some questions that
Mhm.
started bouncing around in my noodle.
Well, yeah, and I think you said it because, like, thanks for sharing that about your dad because I like that resonates completely where I'm at right now. My dad's just like very much in this fear, right? And I
Yeah,
struggle with that because I'm like, why? Like, why is it so negative all the time? And I'm trying to have that compassion, like, so I have to
yeah,
really remind myself, but it's harder when it's like family.
yes, it
But
is.
it's like if we can look back at like the generational patterns, like, you know, and I don't know if you've watched that show Mad Men. I always think of Mad Men.
No,
Oh, it's like really good show, by the way, because it goes into like it's like what is it, the 50s and the 60s and all the businessmen doing like advertisement back then, and like the way they interact with like them being in power and like the woman in the workplace. And then it actually historically follows, you know, how things change with like the civil rights movement and like women starting to get more like, you know, roles and more of a having more of an input like within this advertisement marketing company. And it's like such a great show, like which is a really good show. But it's like if we think about that and see, so like, you know, my parents, for instance, when they grew up, what their parents were thinking and how they were raised, they were, you know, there was a disconnect depending on many of our parents and how they felt it was okay for women. They should show nurturance and they should show like love and emotion. For men, it was like, no, don't. And around
Yeah.
that time, like that Mad Men show, you can see the impact that like alcohol and having extramarital affairs and all these things impacted their life because they didn't really know how to cope. That's how I saw this. And
Yes.
so at that time, that 60s, like that's what many of those men were going through. And then they gave birth to people like my parents, like, and so forth. I don't know what generation that is. I'm not good with the numbers or but now, like, so I think that's kind of why, like, a lot of men that we're seeing now, they have been impacted with that. And then we're seeing the next generation being like, they're growing up and they too are kind of struggling, but it's like they are, I think, are waking up more to, okay, this hasn't really worked. It didn't work for my parents. It didn't work for my parents' parents. Maybe there was alcohol or other addictions and things that came up. How do I make this switch now? Right. So it's important we have that compassion. Like we did choose us being here, but it's like, we didn't really choose wanting horrible things to happen. Right. And I don't think our parents or their parents wanted to make those choices either, but they did the best that they could. And it's like, if we can learn that and trust that it's part of our like healing journey, right, to wake up. Because there are days I'm like, why on earth did I choose to be born into a house where, it's very Christian values and everything I am passionate about now are things that they would say are like really wrong, right? It's like, why? Like, it's been such a horrible experience. And yet at the same time, I'm like, wow, I can see the depth of what I'm learning with this. Like, look at what I'm like healing within myself and on like another, like, a collective conscious level for all of humanity, right?
Yeah.
So
yes,
it's just, we have to be gentle with ourselves. Each day is just another day of learning it. So
excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
So watch the show.
Watch the show.
I have no sponsorship or whatever in that. I don't make money from it. It's just a good show.
Mad Men. I don't generally watch a lot of TV. I literally started purging a lot of media from my life to the point, believe it or not, the Taliban had taken over Afghanistan, and I didn't know about it until almost 2 weeks later.
Oh yeah, you're like, oh what?
Yeah, because I don't listen to the radio a lot. I don't watch a lot of news, and if somebody tells me something interesting, of course I'll open it up and research it. But I just found that, if you watch a news program, you see about 40 minutes of just negative, negativity. And then you get the weather and the sports and, something that happened in your community, and it closes out. And it's like, I don't want to find out who was broken into this week or robbed or murdered. And, and it just, and other countries are so desensitized to it. Like when I was in Mexico, they were talking about some cartel shooting a bunch of police officers right at the gas station, and they showed it. Like here in Canada, they would say, oh, there was a shooting at a gas station, and the camera might zoom in on a little speck of blood over by the gas pump. But in Mexico, they show it. And then they slow motion it, and it's like, what the hell is that?
Yeah.
Right? But I just got to a point where probably about 2-3 years ago, I'm just like, I'm tired of hearing about what toilet paper the Queen uses to wipe her butt. Like, I don't care. Like, leave the poor old lady alone. Leave Prince Harry alone. Like, I'm not a big royal fanatic or anything, but like every day I have to know if, the Queen, looked sideways during an event, therefore she dislikes somebody. It's like, why?
Stop reading into everything. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, like, and I'm totally of the mind. Like, someone mentioned this the other day. A friend of mine, just the fear that was coming up with a lot of the news. That, because she was like, I want to be informed, right? And it's like, I understand that it's important to be informed. I also trust that things will come to you when you need to know, right? Intuitively. Yes. You will be guided to look into the news or to look into something or to talk to someone, and that message will come in. But it's like a really, again, that balance, right? Are you overlooking and reading and absorbing so much of this toxic information? Or are you remaining in like a balance of, you know, trusting that you are safe no matter what is happening, and that trusting too that you'll make the best decision to like do the right thing, like morally
Yeah.
for and ethically for like all of humanity, right? But I hear you, and I think the news, you know, when I was growing up, we watched the news a lot, like dinner time, it would be on CNN and like all this stuff. But I'm like, that's one thing I can't agree with my parents. I'm like, I don't want to read all the articles or hear the bad thing, bad thing, bad thing. And then they throw in that good thing, like from the community, like you said, like, look at this cute little puppy. And then you're like, oh, and then it goes to, and death and murder and da da da. And then you're like, and it throws our actual nervous system into a fight or flight freeze response. And that is why I think it's so unhealthy, is that it's literally a trauma tube of information. So you have to be so mindful what you're watching and putting in physically in your mouth to eat and drink, and in your mind through your eyes, right? Like, because it's giving us messages on like so many levels that we just carry if we're not conscious about it. Yeah, so that's good.
You know, I do find some media, it has good places, but just, I bet you 80% of the media you see is just, it's garbage. Honestly, in my opinion, it's garbage. You know,
People's opinions.
I like seeing community stuff. I like seeing, you know, all the good stuff and the truthful things, right? I don't like how media, they struggle for ratings and money, and they bend the truth, and you know, that stuff I have zero patience for. And it's, you know, it just really weighs heavy. That's, purge it out of your life and enjoy life. Don't be afraid of things. Don't be programmed to be afraid of things, right?
Yeah. Like
Excellent. Excellent. Okay, Fola, it's been extremely exciting and wonderful to have you on the Green Desk podcast. And I hope to actually have a podcast with both you and Crystal, both you two feed off of each other, and you guys make me laugh a lot.
I hope in a good way. No, I'm just joking.
No,
I'm just joking.
Yeah, I still remember the one story we shared. Well, Crystal's story, but that's for another
okay, episode. Yeah, I think I remember.
Yes, well,
maybe that's like another episode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Put a little censorship warning on it. Yeah, sometimes
both you ladies are amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, you too. Thank you for having me here, and all the best, everyone, wherever you are listening.
Thank you so much, Fola. Talk soon.
Yeah.